Welcome to the first biology video for Form 5. I will be teaching you with clarity and help to develop your creativity and critical thinking skills. To receive notification of new biology videos, please subscribe and hit the bell button below. Thank you. This video is about Form 5 biology. The topic is Chapter 1. The subtopic is 1.5, Role of the Circulatory System in the Body's Defense Mechanism. We'll be studying how the body defends itself against pathogens such as bacteria and viruses. In this present age of globalization, humans are fighting a serious war. We call it the cell wars, with the tiniest organisms in the universe, such as the viruses and bacteria, which can cause immense harm to the human body and the human population. So it is very timely to study this topic on the human body's defense mechanism. Let's get started, fifth formers. There will be a few wonderful acronyms for you at the end to remember some of the stuff that you study here. Why does the body need a defense mechanism? The human body's defense mechanism can be likened to an army of soldiers that protects the country from the attacks of the enemy. Thus, the soldiers of our body are the white blood cells or the leukocytes, which may also sacrifice their lives when destroying the pathogens or disease-causing microorganisms. We also have physical barriers such as the skin and the mucous membranes to prevent entry of dangerous microorganisms which cannot be seen with the naked eye. So the first reason why we need the defense mechanism is to defend our bodies against pathogens. And we must know the meaning of the word pathogens. They are disease-causing microorganisms. So please remember this term, pathogens, which are everywhere in the environment and invisible to us. So that's why they are very dangerous, because we cannot see them with our eyes. To prevent them from entering the body, by using the skin and the mucous membranes to protect us. And number 3, to kill them if they enter the body through phagocytosis and also through the production of antibodies by lymphocytes, if they enter the blood. For example, pathogens can be transmitted by air, food, animal vectors, needles, or by direct contact with the skin. Thus, the human body has 3 lines of defense against pathogens to give us the best defense against them and prevent them from entering the body. Let us discuss this flow chart, which is very useful to study the 3 lines of defense of our body. The first line of defense is the skin and the mucous membranes. For the skin, there are a few structures and fluids that help to protect us. For example, sweat and sebum contain lysosome to kill pathogens. So usually we think of sweat as something very dirty or smelly, but actually it has a role in killing pathogens by using an enzyme called lysosome. We will discuss this in the next slide. The mucous membranes refer to the trachea, which produce mucus, and other parts of the body that can secrete mucus. But generally, the secretion of mucus from trachea traps dust and bacteria, and the epithelial cells of the trachea also contain cilia, which sweeps the dust particles and mucus to the pharynx. For the second line of defense, this comes into play when the first line of defense has failed to prevent the entry of the pathogens. So if the pathogens gain entry into a wound, through a wound, a cut or a wound on the skin, then the second line of defense will begin to act. And this is the process of phagocytosis by phagocytes. Phagocytes are the white blood cells that carry out phagocytosis, and this includes the neutrophils and the macrophages, like the monocytes. We'll discuss this in more detail later. Now, if the pathogens should be successful in overcoming the second line of defense and enter into the bloodstream, then it's red alert, and we need the third line of defense, the final line of defense, to kill or destroy them. So the third line of defense involves the immune system and the production of antibodies produced by white blood cells called lymphocytes. So let us study the three lines of defense, starting from the first line of defense. The first line of defense involves the skin and the mucous membranes, which are like barriers to prevent the entry of pathogens into the body. This type of defense is non-specific. It means that the defense mechanism acts against all kinds of pathogens and is not directed against one specific pathogen. All kinds of pathogens will be prevented from entering the body using this line of defense. So it's non-specific. Let's look at the first line of defense. What are the components of the first line of defense? Firstly, there's the skin, with its dead keratinized layer on the epidermis that forms a barrier that's difficult to penetrate. Secondly, on the skin or in the skin, we have the sebaceous glands that produce sebum or oil, a type of oil, that contains lysozymes, which are enzymes that can destroy pathogens. Also in the skin, we have the sweat glands, which produce sweat, that also has lysozymes to destroy pathogens like bacteria. Secondly, in the mouth, there is saliva. Saliva contains lysozymes too to destroy pathogens. So, a lot of the body fluids produced by the body contains lysozymes to destroy pathogens. Thirdly, if a person should get a cut on his skin or a wound on his skin, that becomes a doorway for pathogens to enter. So the blood will quickly clot on the wound or cut to seal it and prevent the entry of pathogens. Fourthly, the eyes produce tears. So tears are not just for crying. The tears contain lysozymes which constantly destroy pathogens that try to enter our eyes. Fifth, we have the trachea. Trachea contains a mucous membrane on its inner surface. And here we see the epithelial cells inside the trachea on the inner surface of the trachea. These epithelial cells help to filter the air that we breathe in. There are two types of cells. The first type of cell produces the mucus, and the mucus in the trachea will trap the dirt in the air that we breathe in. After that, the second type of epithelial cell, which contains cilia, will act. Cilia are the tiny hair-like projections on the surface of the epithelial cells, and they act like a broom to sweep the mucus containing the dust particles and bacteria or pathogens to the pharynx near the mouth. After that, the person will cough out the mucus from the pharynx. Lastly, hydrochloric acid in the stomach has a pH of between 2 to 3, which is very acidic, and this helps to destroy pathogens in the food that is eaten. Let us do a word study on this word lysosome. Most biological terms can be broken down into a few root words from the Greek or Latin language. Thus, lysosome is actually formed from these two words, lysis and zyme. Lysis means to break down in the Greek language, or to digest and break down, whereas zyme comes from the word enzyme. So, a lysosome is actually an enzyme that carries out lysis. Thus, the definition of lysosome is as follows. It is an enzyme found in saliva, sebum, sweat, and tears, the body fluids, that breaks down the cell walls of bacteria and destroys them. So, lysosome is a form of defense mechanism to kill any bacteria that tries to enter our body through the mouth or the skin or the eyes. Here's a question. State 4 substances in the human body that contains lysozymes. So there's an acronym that you can form to answer this question. Let's look at the acronym first. SSST, the underlined words, stands for sweat, saliva, sebum, and T for tears. So smart. It's a funny acronym, but it works to help you remember 4 substances in the human body that contains lysosome. So the answer is sweat, sebum, saliva, and tears. So smart. We have already discussed the first line of defense, which is the skin. Here are a few more points to take note. The dead keratinized layer is formed when the cells on the upper surface of the epidermis becomes filled with a hard protein called keratin. So that layer is hardened and dried, and it forms an effective barrier that is difficult for pathogens to penetrate. Secondly, sebaceous gland secretes sebum. We have to know how to draw the sebaceous gland in a diagram of the skin. So sebaceous gland is right beside the hairs of the body, and do not confuse it with the sweat gland, which has a sweat duct that opens up to the surface of the body. For sebaceous gland, its function is to secrete sebum, and the sebum has 2 functions. The first function of the sebum is that it contains lysosome to destroy bacteria. Secondly, the sebum is acidic and causes the skin to have a pH of pH 5.5, which inhibits the growth of bacteria. Thirdly, blood clot seals cuts or wounds and prevents entry of bacteria. Fourthly, sweat gland. We have to know how to identify the sweat gland and also draw it on a picture of the skin. So sweat gland secretes sweat that contains lysosome to destroy bacteria. And the structure of the sweat gland is like a rope that is coiled up. So you must know how to draw this diagram. So usually there will be a duct that leads up to the top for the sweat to flow out. So learn to draw the sweat gland and sebaceous gland, and also to identify these structures in a picture of the skin in case you are asked to identify them and discuss the first line of defense. Still discussing the first line of defense, let's talk about the trachea. So what is the mucous membrane in the trachea? A mucous membrane is a membrane that covers the surface of internal organs and lines the body cavities. It may secrete a thick protective fluid called mucus. So here's the picture of the trachea with the airway for the air to flow into the lungs. On the inner surface of the trachea, we have the epithelial tissue, which is made up of cells called the epithelial cells. So there are two types of epithelial cells here. The first epithelial cell is the goblet cell, whose function is to secrete mucus, a sticky substance that can trap dirt particles from the air on it. So as we breathe in the air, the mucus is filtering the air by trapping the dirt particles on it. Next, to get rid of this mucus from the body, there is the second epithelial cell. This one contains cilia that sweeps the dust particles upwards to the pharynx, near the mouth. So cilia are tiny hair-like projections on the epithelial cells that are constantly moving upwards like a broom. It sweeps the dust particles like a broom does towards the pharynx. After that, a person will cough out the mucus with the dust particles. To help you remember all the components of the first line of defense, we have a super acronym here that I thought up. Much blood, sweat and tears for cysts. MU is for mucus, C is for cilia, H is for hydrochloric acid. Blood stands for blood clot. Sweat stands for sweat itself, and tears is for tears. So sweat and tears contain the lysozymes. S in the cyst is for skin and sebum. Skin forms a protective barrier that's difficult to penetrate. That is the keratinized layer. And the other S is for sebum, which is the oil that is produced by the sebaceous glands. So there you have it. Here we have 8 components of the first line of defense. So in case it comes out as an essay question where you have to explain all the components of the first line of defense, then you can use this acronym very effectively. So again, you have to paste this phrase up somewhere together with the meaning, what it stands for, and view it constantly so that it becomes like part of you, that you can just quote it and remember what it stands for. Let's discuss the second line of defense. If pathogens get past the first line of defense, they will meet the second line of defense, which is phagocytosis. This defense is non-specific, meaning that it acts against all types of microorganisms and not just against one particular type of microorganisms. So this is the same as for the first line of defense. Both lines of defense are non-specific. Definition for phagocytosis is that it is a process whereby two events occur. Phagocytes engulf the pathogens first of all using the pseudopodia, and secondly, they destroy the pathogens by using enzymes to digest the pathogens. So we have to remember this definition, memorize it, because this is a common exam question. What is the meaning of phagocytosis? Lastly, the phagocytes are the neutrophils, the white blood cells. And also, these phagocytes will also include the macrophages and the monocytes. Let us discuss the second line of defense in more detail. We must be able to explain the process of phagocytosis by phagocytes for the exam questions, as it is a popular exam question. By the way, the word phagocyte means a cell that eats. The word phago means to eat and cyte means cell. So it's a cell that eats something. Firstly, in the process of phagocytosis, bacteria that have entered the body will produce chemicals that are foreign to our body. This causes the neutrophil to be attracted by the chemical, and so the neutrophil will move towards the bacteria. The neutrophil then engulfs the bacteria with pseudopodia, or its false feet. It will extend the pseudopodia towards the bacteria and form a phagocytic vacuole surrounding the bacteria. Next, lysosome. A lysosome will fuse with the vacuole, and the lysosome contains digestive enzymes, so it will release the enzymes to digest the bacteria, and after that it will absorb the useful products from the digestion of bacteria. So this is how the bacteria is destroyed, through phagocytosis. So please memorize this process step by step for exam or for the essay or structured questions. Let's discuss an interesting HOTS question related to the lines of defense. Question 1. A man found that his white blood cells had increased when doing a blood test. What is one reason for the increase in the number of white blood cells? Explain your answer. I will give you a while to think about the answer. Let's look at the answer. He may be having an infection, that is, pathogens have entered and invaded his body. So the meaning of the word infection is that it is a condition where pathogens have entered and invaded the body of a person and reproduced there. Therefore, the number of white blood cells increases as a response by the defense mechanism to destroy the large number of pathogens that entered the body. So 1 mark for infection, 1 mark for pathogens entered and invaded the body, and 1 mark for destroy the large number of pathogens. Here is another question. Question 2. State one other symptom that may occur due to infection and explain your answer. So what is one other sign that may occur when there's an infection? Let's look at the answer. The symptom is fever. As we know, when people fall sick from flu and other conditions, they will get a fever. So what is the reason that people who fall sick get fever? Fever is actually a defense mechanism whereby the body temperature increases, which helps to inhibit the growth and reproduction of pathogens like bacteria in the body. So 1 mark for fever, 1 mark for increase the body temperature, and 1 mark for helps to inhibit the growth of pathogens or bacteria. Here's a mnemonic for the second line of defense, which is phagocytosis by phagocytes. Super power. S for second, P for phagocytosis, and the other P for phagocytes. Or a simpler mnemonic would be just supper. S-U-P-P-E-R. The third line of defense will be discussed in the next video. The third line of defense involves the production of antibodies from the lymphocytes. So here are two suggestions for the acronyms that you can form to remember the third line of defense. TALK, TALK. T for third line of defense, A for antibody, and L for lymphocytes. Or another alternative is LATE, L for lymphocytes, A for antibody, and T for third. As in, lymphocytes produce antibodies in the third line of defense. Finally, here is a suggestion to combine the three lines of defense together. Suggestion for the mnemonic that can use. Much blood, sweat and tears, said Sis, who sipped latte. So much blood, sweat and tears, said Sis is the first line of defense. Sipped is the second line of defense. You must have SPP. And previously I suggested superpower or supper. But here sipped fits in well with latte. So S for second line of defense, P for phagocytosis by P phagocytes. And latte has already been discussed above, is the third line of defense. So which acronym you use, it depends on you. I have given you the choices and you choose the one where you can remember better. If you cannot remember all the three lines of defense in one sentence, then you can break them up. And these acronyms do work as long as you review it constantly for the exams. Based on an analysis of past year's questions in SPM, the following conclusions were made. Firstly, all the three lines of defense are important and need to be studied well, as a lot of these concepts have not yet been tested fully in the essay and structured questions for SPM. For example, the first line of defense may be asked in the essay question. Also, looking at the world situation today, where viral diseases are on the rise, this could be an important topic or a hot topic for biology SPM. Secondly, the first and third line of defense, memorize them well, practice using the memory aids too, in case they come out in the exam. For phagocytosis as the second line of defense, this is a frequent question in SPM and other exams, so you must be able to explain the process well and draw the stages well for the structured questions. We had some fun forming the acronyms and discussing the acronyms and mnemonics that can be used to remember the first, second and third line of defense. You can start reviewing them and test yourself to see whether you remember the facts better for the first, second and third line of defense. And you'll be surprised to find that your memory can improve and that you will remember the facts better and get a sense of satisfaction from using these acronyms. So in the next lesson, we'll discuss the third line of defense, which is the production of antibodies by the lymphocytes. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. Goodbye.